Nietzsche called it the heaviest thought. Not the most complex, not the most original, the heaviest. The thought that, if you truly let it land, if you held it without flinching and felt its full weight, would either crush you or change you completely. It goes like this. What if this life, exactly this one, every moment of it, had to repeat forever? Not as a second chance, not with improvements or corrections, the same conversations, the same failures, the same losses, the same quiet moments, the same everything, cycling back endlessly, with no exit and no variation for all of eternity. How does that feel? Whatever you just felt, that reaction is exactly what Nietzsche wanted you to feel, because he wasn't describing a cosmological theory. He was holding up a mirror, and what you see in it tells you almost everything about how you are actually living your life right now. This is the eternal recurrence. And tonight we go as deep into it as it deserves. In part 1 of this series, we looked at the will to power, the drive toward self-overcoming that Nietzsche considered the fundamental force in all living things. If you haven't seen that episode, it's worth watching first. But the eternal recurrence stands on its own. You don't need the will to power to feel the weight of what we're about to discuss. Nietzsche introduced the eternal recurrence in The Gay Science, published in 1882. He presented it through one of his most famous passages, a demon appearing to you in your loneliest moment and posing a question. The demon asks, "This life as you now live it, and have lived it, you will have to live once more, and innumerable times more. There will be nothing new in it. Every pain and every joy, every thought and every sigh, everything unspeakably small and great in your life will return to you, in the same succession and sequence." The question is not whether you believe this literally. Nietzsche was a philosopher, not a physicist. He was not making a claim about the actual mechanics of the universe. The question is how you respond to the thought, whether it lands as liberation or as a curse. He wrote that the question in each and everything would be, do you want this once more and innumerable times more? It would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight. Or how well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life, to crave nothing more fervently than this ultimate eternal confirmation and seal? That last line is the one worth sitting with. How well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life, to crave nothing more fervently than this? Not to accept it, not to tolerate it, to crave it. To want the repetition so completely that the thought of it fills you not with dread, but with something close to joy. For most people, if they are honest, the first reaction to the eternal recurrence is not joy. It is something closer to horror. The parts of your life you would not choose to repeat rise immediately to the surface. The regrets, the wasted years, the relationships that ended badly, the version of yourself you were at your lowest. The thought of living those things again, and again and again, is not a pleasant one. Nietzsche knew this. He designed the thought experiment to produce exactly that reaction. Because the horror is information, what the horror tells you is which parts of your life you have not yet made peace with, which choices you haven't yet owned, which version of yourself you are still, somewhere underneath everything, ashamed of or regretful about. A person who has genuinely lived, who has made choices they stand behind, who has faced what needed facing, who has become progressively more themselves rather than less, should feel something different when confronted with the eternal recurrence. Not necessarily joy immediately, but something closer to a yes than a no. A recognition that the life, with all its difficulty, was worth living as it was, rather than as it might have been. The gap between where most people actually land, and that yes, that gap is what the eternal recurrence is designed to show you. The practical power of the eternal recurrence is not in believing it literally, it is in using it as a decision-making filter. Nietzsche suggested, and this is the most actionable interpretation of the idea, that you apply the thought to your choices before you make them. Not after, when the regret is already there. Before. In the moment when you are deciding how to spend your time, what to pursue, who to be, what to say. The question becomes, if I had to repeat this choice eternally, if this moment and everything that follows from it would cycle back forever, would I choose it? That question has a remarkable clarifying effect, because it removes the escape hatch that most poor decisions rely on. The escape hatch of impermanence, the reassurance that this is just temporary, that you will course correct later, that the version of yourself making this choice is not the real one, and the real one will arrive soon and do better. The eternal recurrence removes the concept of later entirely. There is no later in which you become the person you mean to be. There is only this choice, this moment, cycling back forever. The real you is the one making this decision right now. Think about the choices in your life that you most regret, not the ones that turned out badly despite being made well. Those are simply misfortune, and misfortune is not what the eternal recurrence is designed to illuminate. The choices you made while knowing, somewhere underneath the rationalization, that you were not choosing from your best self. The shortcuts taken, the truths avoided, the things left unsaid or said when they should have been left. Those choices were made possible, in part, by the implicit belief that they were temporary, that you could absorb their consequences and move on, that the future contained a version of yourself who would not have made them. The eternal recurrence collapses that belief entirely. If this choice repeats forever, then it is not a small thing. It is not a detour. It is a permanent feature of your existence, as permanent as anything can be. And the self that makes it is not a temporary version on the way to the real one. It is simply you. This sounds punishing, and in a certain light it is. But Nietzsche's intention was not punishment, it was clarity. The kind of clarity that makes a different quality of choice possible. A person who genuinely applies the eternal recurrence filter to their decisions, who asks seriously whether they could want this choice to repeat forever, tends to make fewer choices they are ashamed of. Not because they have become morally perfect, but because the question removes the comfortable ambiguity that bad choices depend on. The ambiguity of impermanence, the fiction of the future self who will be better. What remains, once that ambiguity is removed, is simpler and harder simultaneously. Just this moment, just this choice, just the self you actually are, choosing what you actually choose, with no escape into a better tomorrow that will clean everything up. Nietzsche considered this not a burden, but a liberation. The liberation of full responsibility. The freedom of having nowhere to hide from yourself. The goal of the eternal recurrence, if a philosophical thought experiment can be said to have a goal, is to build a life that you could say yes to completely. Not a life without difficulty, not a life without failure or loss, or the particular pain that comes from being human in a world that does not arrange itself around your preferences. Nietzsche had no interest in a painless life and considerable contempt for the pursuit of one. The goal was not the elimination of hardship, but the development of a self that could face hardship without wishing it away, that could look at the full picture of its own existence and find it not just bearable but affirmable. This connects directly to what we explored in the Amor Fati episode, the love of fate that Nietzsche considered his highest formula for human greatness. The Eternal Recurrence and Amor Fati are the same idea approached from different directions. Amor Fati says love what has happened. The Eternal Recurrence asks whether you are living in a way that makes that love possible. The yes Nietzsche was reaching toward is not naive. It is not the yes of someone who has never suffered or never failed or never chosen badly. It is the yes of someone who has done all of those things, who has been through what they have been through, and arrived at a place where they understand that their life, exactly as it was the only possible path to the person they became. That yes is earned. It cannot be performed or forced or decided in advance. It arrives, when it arrives, through the slow accumulation of living in a way you can stand behind, of making choices you would make again, of becoming progressively more the person you actually are, rather than the person circumstance or expectation pressured you to be. The Eternal Recurrence is the test of whether you are moving in that direction, not a test you pass or fail once, a test you face every day in every choice that matters, in every moment where you could choose from your best self or settle for something easier. Nietzsche wrote The Eternal Recurrence while he was alone in the Swiss Alps, walking. He described the moment it came to him as overwhelming, a thought so large and so heavy that he had to stop moving. He stood with it for a long time before he could go on. He spent the rest of his philosophical life circling back to it, testing it, developing it, finding new angles into its implications. It was not a casual idea for him. It was the thought that organized everything else. Go back to the demon and the question. This life, exactly this one, once more, and innumerable times more. The honest answer to that question, right now, today, is it closer to yes or closer to no? And what would have to change for it to move toward yes? That second question, what would have to change, is not an invitation to despair about where you are. It is the most useful question the Eternal Recurrence produces, because it points, with unusual precision, at exactly what needs to be different, not in some abstract future. Now, in the choices available to you today, Nietzsche called it the heaviest thought. It is also, if you let it work on you, one of the most clarifying ones. Next time, we return to Jung, the persona, the mask you built to face the world, the price of wearing it too long, and what is waiting underneath